This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast, session number 378. 2 formulas for flexible hypnosis.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Jason Linett here, and so good to have you listening here once again. And recently we just wrapped up the Do Hypnosis Anywhere event. This was the 5-day challenge for confident online hypnosis. Now, the cool thing is you can actually head over right now to dohypnosisanywhere.com and read all about an event that has already happened. However, we did archive it, and actually, as of now, you can actually go ahead and sign up for dohypnosisanywhere.com and get instant on-demand access to the entire event. Now, I wanted to take today, though, to actually showcase 2 specific things that I taught on the 5th day of the event, which, as I'm now recording this a couple of days after everything has wrapped up, at least in real time, these are 2 of the things that I've received some of the best feedback on, which surprisingly may seem to be extremely simple. However, so often people get caught up in rigid protocols or scripted techniques and have this issue with letting their hypnotic work become even more flexible. So yes, you could head over, as you should, to dohypnosisanywhere.com and for really just $27 get access to the entire event. And if I can say so here now, you can actually go through the event even faster now that it's all on demand. You don't have to wait 1 day at a time as the other 700 people did as the event played out. You get instant on-demand access. Every word of it has been transcribed. And today, let me just kind of peel back the curtain and go ahead and share with you 2 of the simplest things that people saw some of the greatest benefit from. Specifically, 2 formulas for flexible hypnosis, which sounds like a really great title for an episode. So, hey, let's dive in. Here we go. Session number 378, 2 formulas for flexible hypnosis. Let's kick this off by leading with the big 4 questions. Now, for those of you that maybe have gone through a full certification training with me, or perhaps you're already a member of a program like hypnoticworkers.com, this is something that's embedded inside of the intake strategy that we've now nicknamed the Work Smart intake. Not for the sake of taking something standard and suddenly slapping a brand new name on it. There's enough of that already in our lovely little hypnotic world. But more so because the way that most people approach the hypnotic intake, unfortunately, in my opinion, does more damage than it does more good. And I mean, here's a bit of the characterization of what I see of a lot of the work out there. I'm now the hypnotist, you're now my client, and it kind of takes on this respect of, let's now sit with each other for an hour and have you completely unravel the story as to how difficult things have been. Unfortunately, further aggravating this idea that this thing is too impossible to be solved. So now that we've spent a full hour talking about how difficult this has been, let me now finally have you close your eyes and kind of jump into the hypnotic work from the relatively negative context of, wow, that sounds impossible. Close your eyes, let's see if we can now fix it. I mean, the equivalent of this in stage hypnosis would be, let's get everyone in the audience extremely excited. Now that we've got them excited and wanting to volunteer, let's bring them up on stage and then do the world's most boring progressive muscle relaxation induction for way too long, and then wonder why we couldn't quite get those volunteers animated once again. Do you see how there's a disconnect? So embedded inside of what I call the Work Smart intake is this formula that really is there to subconsciously train your client to speak in code and reveal to you what techniques they actually need in order to affect change. And this is where, and never for the sake of rushing through everything, no, not at all. This is where you might be surprised that, yes, sometimes the intake takes a full half hour, 45 minutes, or even upwards of an hour if it needs to be that long. And there have been some other moments on the other side of things where perhaps that intake was done and accomplished in a matter of 10 to 12 minutes. Never for the sake of, again, rushing or speeding through it, but instead because, you know what? I got what I need. Because what it really comes around to are 4 simple questions. And honestly, your intake could become these 4 questions. I tend to prefer a little bit more nuance to it. But it's as soon as you have the answers to these 4 questions, you really do have the ability to begin and at least start to draw a line between the things you've talked about with your client, as well as the individual methods and techniques, the things you're going to say to them inside of the hypnotic process. So here are the big 4 questions. What are you doing now? What would you rather be doing? How are you feeling now? How would you rather be feeling? And yes, that is extremely simple. Yet you would be surprised how often the intake process, even for people who have been doing this work for quite some time, just kind of drags and further exaggerates the intensity of the problem. And unless there's a specific reason as to why you're doing that, you may actually be standing in the way of the hypnotic change process. So yes, throughout this, we're going to be, as the language is, chunking down into specifics, chunking up into value-based statements. But really, as soon as we have the answers as to what are you doing now? What would you rather be doing? How are you feeling now? How would you rather be feeling? And I mention this because so often that intake dives a little too heavily into the past, really spends so much time, twisting the knife of the pain of the difficulty, which, yes, we do need to keep track of the before. Yet what's so often missing is getting into that after. What's it going to be like as this is gone? How would you rather be feeling? And as you're feeling that way, what are those things you would rather be doing? And this was one of those things that I've already received a couple of dozen emails, at least 2 of the 2 dozen so far, as to how people have gone through this dohypnosisanywhere.com challenge event and already diving into client sessions, already working with people, whether it's online or whether it's even in person, how there's this greater specificity to the work that they're doing. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to take this time for this week's episode just to kind of, again, pull something out of what we shared during this event. And by doing so, help to bring some greater clarity to the work that you are doing. So as you're approaching your sessions, as you're in that process, recognize that the intake is not just, let me, find out everything wrong and see where we're going to go in the session. The intake itself also has quite a bit to do with the actual change process getting into motion. And by doing so, having this ability to have a better understanding as to exactly what we ought to do, why we ought to do it, and exactly how to proceed with that session. So one more time, what are you doing now? What would you rather be doing? Followed by, how are you feeling now? And how would you rather be feeling? Here's what's, dare I say, fun about this. For those of you that are relatively brand new to hypnosis, this already perhaps seems extremely obvious. And this is what we mean when we often say breaking that line of standing upon tradition, doing things just because our instructors said they were important. And instead, let's just bring a modernization to the work that we do. And by doing so, see a greater sense of clarity of the work that we ought to be doing as hypnotists. But hey, this week's episode is not just one formula for flexible hypnosis. Oh no, my friends. This is 2 formulas for flexible hypnosis. And honestly, what I'm about to share is something that I've been doing for years. And just for the sake of having a name on it to draw a bit of a reference, this is a 3-point formula I'm about to share that, yes, we finally slapped a name on it. Why not? Here it is, the official Hypnotic Worker Adjustment Formula. And the backstory to this, well, first of all, Hypnotic Workers is my entire hypnosis training in digital access format. It's everything from inductions to techniques you won't find anywhere else to real client demonstrations, from genuinely walking in the door to walking out the door every bit of it transcribed from modeling and a phenomenon-based approach to change. You can find out all the details over at hypnoticworkers.com. And by the way, there's a brand new, really cool video on that page too, so check that out at hypnoticworkers.com. This whole adjustment formula thing, though, where this came from is this kind of compartmentalizing of techniques. This idea that this thing is for this and this thing is for that, or the scenario that so often people would get themselves into of feeling stuck that, okay, so here's this technique, and let's say in the context of this recent Do Hypnosis Anywhere event would be that, well, yeah, but in the online session, I might not be able to see their hand, therefore I cannot do the ideomotor response. Or perhaps here is an instant induction, which, by the way, I got some phenomenal feedback from what happened on the Day 6 bonus Q&A of the Do Hypnosis Anywhere event as to a complete unraveling as to what makes the instant induction work, and even so, how, yes, indeed, you could actually make it work for an online session. However, I present every reason why you could and you should, and every reason why perhaps you might choose another route. And as a bit of a preview of that, well, here it is, the Hypnotic Worker Adjustment Formula. I'm going to give you the very short version of it. I'm going to give you, here come the air quotes, the script, and then we're going to simplify it even further. So here's the 3-point formula. Point 1, what's the thing? Point 2, what's the thing's higher purpose? Point 3, what's another thing for the same purpose? Let me hit you with that one more time. Point 1, what's the thing? Point 2, what's the thing's higher purpose? And point 3, what's another thing for the same purpose? So if you want a little bit more language inside of this, though these are not necessarily words that we say to our clients, these are questions we ask ourselves to make some very simple modifications. Thus the title for this week's episode, Flexible Hypnosis. What thing do I need to do? And did you hear the air quotes around the word need? It was very intentional there. What thing do I need to do? What does that thing accomplish? What else can accomplish that thing? Which, once again, the core formula here is thing, thing's higher purpose, other thing for the same purpose. Now, this I have to tell you has, implications far beyond online hypnosis. Let's say, and I've had a client like this many years ago, they were blind since birth, and you actually can do the eye catalepsy, the first step, let's say, of a Dave Elman induction, with someone without vision. Because if they have muscular control over the eyelid muscles, well, they can still squeeze them down. Even though they might not be able to see, they can still feel the fact that they cannot open and close them, and therefore we can still do the small muscle catalepsy. And that's the thing. Yet what if it's a person who, by way of an injury, no longer has muscular control over those eyelid muscles? And it doesn't mean, oh no, you can't do this thing. No, it means, what's another thing? Well, what's the thing's higher purpose? Well, step 1 of a Dave Elman induction is not eye lock. It's instead, as I just said, small muscle catalepsy. And this is where, what's another thing for the same purpose? I could make the finger stiff and rigid. I can make it so the more you try to flex that finger, it just relaxes even further. We can do it with a toe. We can do it with another group of small muscles. So again, there's so many different variations. There's so many different options. So let's stick with this example of a Dave Elman induction, which, even if you're not yet familiar with it, it's a big part of the philosophy of hypnotic workers, not just that technique itself, but breaking things down into process so we know the how and the why beneath it. And even if you feel you already know that induction, how it really can become a whole masterclass in hypnotic tonality and embedded NLP, embedded commands inside of it towards influential language and using your words, your tonality to direct towards the result you want, as opposed to the result you don't want. So if it's the moment of the floppy arm, as it's lovingly referred to as, I'm going to pick up that arm and let it just plop down. Well, if it's an online session, let's run the formula. What's the Hypnotic Workers Adjustment formula, what's the thing? The floppy arm drop. What's the thing's higher purpose? Well, actually, that one, it's going to sound familiar, is not just small muscle catalepsy, but no, it's large muscle catalepsy. And what's another thing for the same purpose? Well, I can make the arm stiff and rigid. Let's run this as an example off of the instant induction. Here's one part of the really big segment we did on the Q&A for the Do Hypnosis Anywhere event. For those that already have that, go watch the Q&A. I believe it hits at about the 65-minute mark of the Day 6 Q&A, or if you haven't yet joined that, again, you know where to go, dohypnosisanywhere.com. It's the Day 6 Q&A. What's the thing? The instant induction. What's the thing's higher purpose? Well, not to go extremely philosophical here, the reason why I like an instant induction, notice why that I just said I like it. I did not say notice the reason why it's the only thing I use. No. The reason why I like the instant induction is that it models a rapid state shift. In a matter of moments, they have gone from normal everyday consciousness into deep hypnotic state. I mean, in a second or two with an instant induction. And the reason why I will make use of that, and it becomes actually part of the change process, not just a hypnostunt, not just a method for creating the hypnotic state, is that in my world, it really embodies how rapidly people can create change. When you think about major life transformations, these are things that happen in just a few moments. And if I can have you instantly go into hypnosis in a matter of seconds, that now becomes a reference point towards just how quickly you can shift a set of belief systems, shift a set of behaviors around that specific issue that you've now hired me to help you with. Oh man, we just got deep on an instant induction, didn't we? Well, that's, in my world, the thing's higher purpose. And if that's the case, it turns out there's a whole bunch of other techniques that satisfy that same purpose. Now, the other techniques might not necessarily be another hypnotic induction, but guess what that means? It means we could use another hypnotic induction and then use another specific method of change as a means to achieve that thing's higher purpose. This is going a whole lot more philosophical than I think some of you expected this to go. Yet this is kind of the big point, as to really looking at the work that you do and understanding the how and the why beneath it. It's not just a matter of the techniques. It's not just a matter of, I learned this and I'm really like using this. It's instead looking inside of the methods and understanding just how flexible all of this becomes. So let's bring this on home with a quick reiteration of what we've covered here today. Here is the big 4 questions that, as you really focus on getting the biggest impact out of these 4 questions inside of your intake, you've already got the change in motion, even before the hypnotic process technically begins. How do you feel now? How would you rather be feeling? What are those things you're doing now? What are those things you'd rather be doing? Once we have that clear understanding, we now see the point where it's not about keeping them in the intake so long so it feels as if they've gotten their money's worth. And some of you smirk, but I have heard that sitting in workshops myself. No. Once we have those key elements, it already begins to connect the dots in terms of exactly what it is we need to work on. And then for every technique you would hold to be dear and believe it has to be done this specific way, pull back and run that Hypnotic Worker Adjustment Formula. What's the thing? What's the thing's higher purpose? And what's another thing for the same purpose? Jason Linett here once again, and as always, thank you so much for interacting with this program, for leaving your reviews online and keeping this conversation going inside of our private Work Smart Hypnosis community. And once again, the event may have already passed, but that does mean you can actually get instant on-demand access to the entire thing right now at dohypnosisanywhere.com. That was 5 days of interactive challenges, 5 days of interactive events. And the benefit now is you can go through it all in rapid fire. You can binge watch, you can binge listen, you can binge read, as the transcriptions are now available. And yes, I did lean a little heavier into a sales message as part of this week's episode, but hey, it's $27 and it's a massive pile of value that's going to help you to become even more flexible, even more confident, helping your clients, whether it's online, whether it's in person, whether it's in groups. These principles are going to swing over to all parts of what you do. So check it out. Get instant access right now at dohypnosisanywhere.com.
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at WorkSmartHypnosis.com.